Howdy and welcome back. So the next section of today's lesson is going to be branching. This is where we're really going to kind of get into some language constructs that will allow us to begin building some more interesting C++ programs. So in C++, we have two means of implementing conditional execution, the if statement and the switch statement. We'll start out with the if statement. An if statement is simply going to conditionally execute another statement based on whether a specified condition is true or not. So in this case, we want to just print out a simple message to the user. I have no clue what application this would get in, but it's been feeling kind of cool up here in Illinois, and well, cold weather was on my mind. So here we go. Under pretty much any scenario, we're going to go ahead and output freezing warning should. And then we're going to determine whether or not it should be issued based on the value of temperature. Assume that temperature is an int and it's storing whatever temperature is outside. Maybe it's hooked up to a thermometer or receiving its value from a thermometer that it's frequently querying. I don't know. Irrespective, if the value stored in that variable is less than 32 or equal to 32, we're going to go ahead and input into that output stream be issued. So the sentence would read, in this case, freezing warning should be issued. If the temperature is above freezing, opposed to inserting be issued into the stream, we'll go ahead and insert not be issued. In that case, it would read freezing warning should not be issued. Notice here that my if statement takes a simple statement here, terminated by a semicolon. To point out here, the if statement doesn't have to have an else branch if it's not needed. For instance, we could simplify the above, snippet of code by essentially having the following. Freezing warning should, and then if the temperature is greater than or equal to 32, we could insert into the stream not, and then we could always then insert into the stream be issued. Another thing to keep in mind as we're going about this is going to be that the branches of the if statements are scopes. So here's a simple computation of an absolute value. If x is less than 0, let's go ahead and make it positive by negating. In this case, ABS x only has meaning within the scope of this if statement. Likewise, for the else condition, ABS only has scope within the else's simple statement that corresponds to it. Therefore, if we attempted to output the value of ABSX after our conditional here, essentially we receive a compilation error because ABSX is already out of scope. So one way to get around this might be to say that int ABSX is equal to x if x is less than 0.0. And again, we really should have some tolerance on this, but for simplicity, I am just kind of glossing over that for now. We could say that ABSX receives the positive value of x in that case, and then we could go into this output statement without any worries about scope, because if we declare it outside, it's going to be visible inside that scope of the if and all the way down through essentially the block of code that has been declared within. So a little bit more on the if statement. You've likely encountered this before. If not, we'll introduce it now. If you have, we'll reinforce it. Each branch of an if statement is going to consist of a single statement or simple statement. So a statement terminated by a semicolon. If we wanted to perform multiple operations, we have to introduce a compound statement. So this is one of the nice things about compound statements. If the if statement's expecting a simple statement, but we need to do more than one series, we can use in place of the simple statement, the compound statement. So here, if number mod 15 equates to 0. We would execute all of the statements that fall between or fall within this block. Else if, so if that condition is not satisfied, we could have another condition that we're checking against. In this case, if number mod 3 equates to 0, we could go ahead and have really any number of statements falling within the corresponding block to that conditional. And we'd continue through. So else if num mod 5 equates to 0, we'd execute whatever's in there. And then finally, if none of those conditions are satisfied, we could say else, let's do whatever's within this block. So style is important. It helps readability with respect to our code. And in this course, we really want all of you to follow the conventions specified in styles outlined in the Google C++ style guide. So for this course, whenever you're writing an if statement, use curly braces for the control statements following the if, else if, and else conditions. The reason for this is this actually isn't totally directed by the Google C++ style guide, but it does really enhance the readability of your code because you know what's if some condition, it's very clear that everything falling within those braces is going to be executed. If you kind of mix it up, and it can just get very confusing fast, and this makes your intentions very well known to the reader. So just go ahead and always use the curly braces even if you don't have to. When we're writing the if statement, we're going to put one space, so a single space between the if and the opening parenthesis, no spaces between the closing parentheses in the closing, sorry, we're on one, I'm getting ahead of myself, I'm doing it in order. We're going to put one space between the closing parentheses and the curly brace, but no spaces between the parentheses and the condition. So no spaces there. So that'll all ride together. We're going to break the line immediately after the opening brace. So notice that this brace up here is on the same line of our if header. And then we're going to do something within that block. I'll say do something interesting. If you can read that, I'll try to write a little clearer. And then we're going to put the closing brace immediately after that, on the line immediately after that. If there is a subsequent else or else if, it's going to appear on the same line as that closing brace with a space separated between. It too will have an opening brace that's going to have a white space between the end of the else and that. Then we'll do something else. And then just like for the if header or if component of this, the close brace would be on its own line directly after the last statement within that block. So here's an example of the correct style from the Google style guide. And this pretty much follows with everything that I've talked about at this point. So here's a couple of principles of the if statement. And this will just enhance readability as well. Always write the common case first, then write the unusual cases thereafter. More precisely, cover the first the case that will reduce the reader's cognitive load so that that's perhaps easiest to understand. Encode complex Boolean expressions in methods and name the methods according to the meaning of that expression. And do this even if the method is only called in one place. So we haven't talked about declaring and defining functions just yet. We will in the next lesson. So keep this in mind when we get to that point. Reading something like, I don't know, assume these are descriptive names. If F is true and G is true, that would be a lot easier to read. Again, assume it's a descriptive name that is sensible. That would be a lot easier to read than something that's, that big and then anded together with, that big if it's complicated.